Welcome one and all, my name is Tawess and today we are doing something special. We're painting a Hunchback. Like Soundwave from the Transformers. And now, here's the thing. It's already base coated because I had no intention of actually rigging around the camera to capture me airbrushing that thing. Trust me, it's dark blue with a wash of black and blue from below to give some shadows. That's it. Nothing more complicated than that. And with that out of the way, let's start the painting. So yeah, since we already have the blue base coat down, we're going to start working on the white areas. And the most logical thing to start with then is ash gray, of course. It's a very light gray color, and it makes a great base for white. Because, as with most things in life, it's a lot easier to build things up in layers than to do it all at once. And while you technically could go the other way around, basically white, wash, white, I felt it's a bit overkill in this case. So, instead, ash gray, gray base for white. Enough tonal difference from white so you can actually see the difference, but not so much that it becomes distracting. And in this case, we're going to hit the thigh parts and the lower arms, but not the hands, because that is how Soundwave looks in the sort of canonical scheme from the cartoon and early comics. And that was the thing I grew up with. That's what we're going to do. The thing known as Generation 1. Anyway. Why Soundwave? Well, because it is a battle mech with a boombox on its shoulder. And it's fun. Things doesn't have to be more complicated than that, you know. It's fun. But yeah. Put paint down the legs, looking good. You have to be a bit careful because you can't redo the fade you got going. That is the biggest problem actually. You have to be really, really careful. Because since we put down a fade with a wash on it already, we can't really redo that. So, he has this yellowish part on his chest, and as always, when we start with yellow, we start with a brown. In this case, basilisk brown. But you can take any tannish, leatherish, and brighter yellow. Brownish yellow. Yellowish brown. Anyway, don't go directly for yellow, because it's going to look like crap. Instead, we hit it with some basilisk brown to make sure that we get a good base for the yellow, because yellow, I have yet to find one miniature paint company that can actually make a yellow that actually works. Yellow is very see-through, it lets through a lot of color, and it likes to take on the color behind it. And when that color is blue, that is not a good place to be in, because that's going to turn green if you're not careful. But yeah, put on a fairly thick layer of basilisk brown. Basilisk brown. I almost bit my tongue there. And let that dry properly. Now, moving forward, there's of course the question of putting some dimension into the blue. So we're going to hit a lot of panels with some ultramarine blue, just to give a bit of a difference between the base coat and the, let's go to top coat first for fun of it. And I've been through this many times before. This is basically selling the idea that there's shadows in between the panels and light's having a hard time hitting there because of the difference in depth. And again, you can take whatever blue you want for this. I took ultramarine because it kind of resembles the comic colors of Soundwave. There's not a reason. So you basically hit all the panels you want. You can hit as many as you want. It is totally up to you. Technically, you could have left it at the stage before this and just add some finishing details. Just kept the grey. If you want to. Again, it looks very serviceable. But we can't stop there. We're going to go a bit deeper. So basically we hit everything with a nice amount of blue. And then make sure that you get places where your light would hit. Basically you put this brighter blue on. Because I mean, why not? And you can go even more aggressive with this if you want to. I have a much brighter blue setting. We're going to use something else later, but you could technically just use that and hit everything that you want. Now, next step is doing the same thing with the white, and we're still not doing white because we're annoying. Instead, we're using Gorgon Hide, my preferred and favorite stand-in for white. It is bluish gray, very pale, and reads a lot like white to the eye. So it's a good mid-tone color for this sort of thing. Because we're going to hit it with matte white as a later step, just to get the very much highest points of the panels to really pop. But if I do this stage in matte white, I can't go up from there. So Gorgon Hide it is. One of these must-have colors in my mind. Such a great white stand-in. Of course, if you pick the color from a different company, just have a look around and see what you can find. But yeah, again, hit the panels. Try to avoid the recessed areas between the panels. It takes practice. It's annoying, and it helps if you keep your paint fairly wet, fairly moist, fairly runny, but not too runny. And this again, difficult thing to manage, because if it gets too runny, it's gonna get into the crevices and the entire effect is gonna be lost. Now we finally hit the white, the proper actual white, and this is basically just hitting all the raised outer edges, making sure that anything that would catch light has this white on it to make sure that it really pops. Because, again, it's a thing we need. Now, you should avoid hitting all panels, because all panels should not be hit in this case, because everything facing downwards should not be done this way. In fact, you should probably stay at the ash gray stage with most of those. But also try to keep the direction uniform. The easiest way is just imagine the light being at zenith, heading top down. But if you go from one side, make sure you keep consistency, because otherwise it's going to look weird. Now, moving on to pinstriping, painting lines. This is one of these arts, and I call it an art because for the people who really know how to do this, it is a art. I'm a mere dabbler, a amateur. But basically, I'm going to put a line across his entire gun. Hers. Technically, Transformers don't have genders. But they are gendered, so yeah, him. Anyway, the trick here is to work slowly and try to move the hand, not the wrist. To move the elbow, if that makes sense. Same goes for the red ring around his arm. Arms, technically, because on both sides. Slow, methodical, fairly wet paint. Try to stabilize your fingers. It is one of these things you just have to practice to get good at. But it looks good once it's done. Trust me on that one. But yeah, take your time. There's no shortcuts. Now, I'm hitting mine with an Abomination Gore, which is my go-to red base, and then with some Dragon Red on top of that, because if you go directly to Dragon Red, it is a bit see-through too. It is bad coverage. So, but the Abomination Gore under makes it a little easier to get a proper solid color. And here comes the yellow. Phoenix Flames over the place where it used to put the basilisk brown, as well as a few thin stripes on the legs, because it has a pattern down there of yellow. They didn't turn out too well in this case because for some reason they were not really agreeing with me. And then of course wrap things up by painting the weapons and the feet. Once we get to the feet, I think we're going to do this on video this time because you'll see me paint the feet several times. But yeah, I go with metallic on the feet in this case because, again, the toy and cartoon model had sort of metallic feet. You do you. There is no must in this case. We also had a few white details around the midsection to emulate his button crotch. Yeah. Now it would be adorable if you had a few extra elementals to put around him for Ravage, Rumble, Frenzy, and Buzzo, but I don't. So we're not going to do that. But yeah, we finished everything up with some dark tone, which is the Army Painter equivalent of Nuln Oil, just to get some actual contrast into the silver, because silver does not do contrast, it gets very flat. So always hit it with some Nuln Oil or some dark tone or whatever you use for a wash. And with that, we're done. We're gonna go on to beauty shots, and until next time, stay safe, be kind, and do play fair. Bye.